Hi everybody. It's about 11:40 p.m. on April Fool's Day. No, I'm kidding. It's 6 I mean sorry, 4:10 a.m. Um and I just woke up and now I'm feeling like recording a video. April Fools. um that almost never happens, I feel like. Except for that one time you saw on my YouTube channel. Um but the reason I'm recording this today is because I was in somewhat of a philosophical mood, I guess you could say. Because every time I take long drives, I was on a long drive today, and in general, I would say whenever I'm just kind of going all about my day for a long periods of time, I get into like a philosophical mood, and this happened very often. So I mean, it took 3 hours. So I took the day off today. It was like a 3 day weekend for me, and took 3 hours to get to Carmel. Spent the day there, and I spoiled myself, and I almost never do this. The last time I had alcohol, a sip of alcohol, was when I had that 6 ounce wine 2 weeks ago. Um, and so I decided, was it 2 weeks ago? It might have been 3 weeks ago, but the reason why the time is somewhat relevant is because at some point, maybe it was about 2 weeks ago, maybe a week ago, I bought this bottle of wine. It's Carmel Road, and at that time I felt very spontaneous. I said, and you can see how much is left, right? This is kind of like how much I drank, but today. And I'm not going to drink it today. I was almost going to actually have some. I'm just going to have free or advertisement here. Maybe try to put it down. Um, shit, that camera's kind of bad. Not that great. I'll just try to put it here, I guess, conveniently. But anyway, maybe I need a tripod or something. But maybe I'll just do this. Um, maybe like back it up quite enough. I don't know. I don't know what. I'm just gonna keep it, I guess, like that. Yeah, and then I don't know. Maybe maybe I'll just hold it or something. Or that's a good view, I guess. Good position. But anyway, I wanted to explain that yeah, I took the day off, the first day off probably in the whole year, and it doesn't even feel like uh, the year is passing, or a whole 4 month, 3 months have passed by uh, since we started the year. Um, the reason, and so basically, yeah, I'm always in a philosophical mood whenever I go on these prolonged times, whenever I'm walking for a long time or whatever. Not so well when I'm running. It's more about when I'm engaged. So if I run prolonged in a prolonged way, then I don't get as much of a philosophical insights as to what's going on. But before I forget, and I should not say that because this is actually probably one of the most important things to discuss, is that Baltimore bridge collapse. I just wanted to give a little bit of my understanding in there. Um, I don't do bridge design, but I understand that based off of the progressive collapse, and I know I'm using those terms because I watched Picardal's video, but there just didn't seem to be enough redundancy to really be a good design. So that off the bat was not acceptable in my opinion. The next thing is, according, and I'm not a bridge engineer, so I don't know how this works, but apparently you have like moats or some kind of additional structure that covers the piers and to prevent it from having any collapse at all. In some cases, maybe not all the time, but he showed that that was the case for the San Francisco. So again, I my condolences for those lives that were lost. We'll always have to compromise to some extent, and that's partially why we get paid, because we're sealing things where there's a high risk. So, which goes back to the whole part of this, um, the point of the video of some of my discussions are all about, which is the Adam Smith Wealth of Nations book. In Wealth of Nations, he discusses Adam Smith discusses what it, what you can expect more profit off of. Like, you can get more, you would expect to be paid more based off of how much work, I mean, how much you're willing to risk. And that's kind of like a lot of entrepreneurs like to discuss this. But in particular, Adam Smith, I think there were different ways in which he said general categories of how one gets paid, more or less in proportion to certain attributes. So I think, in addition to the risk, there was also like how much, I think, shoot, it's on the top of my head, but I don't quite remember what it was. It was like, if you were to, how much, it's not like how much you're willing to lose, but it was like you get paid more. Um, you should be getting paid more economically based off of, oh God, what was it? Anyway, so there were like three different ways, um, which is kind of interesting because I wasn't trying to discuss that first and foremost. So I'll probably go back to it, or I might just flip through the book. I'm on about page 500, um, but what I was going to discuss more than anything related to the book is, and I had a lot of thoughts that were just going through my head as I was driving. So unfortunately, probably should have written it down, but it's kind of hard to like flush it out. And again, the only times that I ever go on YouTube and just kind of get my thoughts out there is when I'm doing philosophical things, or when the philosophy's kind of like fresh. So, or the only times that I'm like going on and on about the things that are important to me. So there was a part of the book, and bear with me here. It's just, I'm trying to remember the context because I just had to handle a few things, and now I'm trying to go back to it. Shoot, what was it? Yeah, so oh, that's right. I just hate to sound so stupid, but it's just, I don't know. It's all about context. Like, one thought leads to another. So the idea is pretty much, how do you, essentially the essential question is, how do you determine if someone is being greedy, right? And I would say, from a Smithian point of view, right now I'm reading about capital. What does it mean what is circular capital versus fixed capital? And how do those capitals get built? How do you build capital? And how do you use it? How do you deploy it? How do people, what are the, also probably what are the sort of like the moral implications? So basically the idea is, well, he's pretty much making an argument, and it makes sense to me, that all capital, whether it's circular or fixed, at the end of the day, it's going to be used to generate, or to stimulate labor. So, I mean, that's like they said that's like the end result. Or he's saying is that the end result of capital. So, by having that fundamental in your mind, you can imagine just how rampant people, especially liberals, are going about discussing certain things, like trying to discuss politics with people, saying how people are so greedy and stuff like that, when in reality, that alone will tell you they don't quite understand. They don't understand. Like, this is like the whole disparity between the two sides, liberals and Republicans, if you want to separate those two, if you want to separate them like that, where essentially you don't understand what it really means to have capital and why you would want to use it or why you would want to keep it. So, for example, you know, even though Warren Buffett is extremely rich and he's has a high net worth, he's not necessarily greedy because, it, in theory, whatever he's doing is deploying labor in a circular way that is then causing everything to be the basically his wealth or wealth that are kind of in his vicinity to be built, to be basically built. So it's not necessarily wealth of nation, but it's wealth of his locality, his vicinity. So it's not being greedy in that sense because you're basically using it to stimulate that building nature. Whereas liberals don't understand, perhaps, and maybe even Republicans too, but let's just think about the liberals. Maybe not may not understand that what is really happening. So maybe they think that this net worth is just a fixed capital where nothing is really being stimulated at all. But in reality, they're not looking at the bank statements, or they're not looking at the statements of how it's being spent and stuff like that. In fact, the only barometer they have is how these leaders like Warren Buffett are spending, are doing on their what they're doing with their taxes, right? That's the only barometer they have. They're not looking at the bigger picture. They're not looking at the 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 cash flows and stuff like that of really what's happening. See, I think that a truly greedy person is somebody who's just trying to basically get away with not paying a damn thing, and they have a lot of capital, and they're just clinging on to that capital without pretty much trying to stimulate any kind of labor or anything like that. And so, because again, I mean, the Smithian view is that the capital, at the end of the day, is all going to be towards labor. And so, if it's not towards labor, it's you're intentionally holding on to it, and you're just basically being greedy with it. So that would be a more precise definition that I think a lot of people can benefit from understanding. Because from that premise, once you understand that, you can look at cash flows and 10Ks and really understand morally what this person's doing. What are they doing with their money? You can sort of, from a premise of this greedy nature, you can sort of kind of gauge, like, is this person greedy or not? You know, and if you don't understand, and this also goes out to the investors too. If you don't understand, like, a basic premise that greediness has to do with holding on to capital, and by the very nature of holding on to capital means you're not trying to stimulate labor, then you might have a hard you might be making investment decisions that are mistakes, and you're thinking that you're identifying a good company when in reality they're actually very greedy, or maybe the other way around. You've thought they were greedy, but in reality they're actually doing something useful with their capital. So it's very, just coming from that premise. I never thought about that before. It's because I just assumed, like, for example, this goes back to the my decision of buying rental property, and even early on, and also the way that I look at my own capital too. Because when I look at my capital, I'm like thinking about trying to get to a certain position based off of, like, what makes sense in my age range and all this stuff, and how much work I've put into it and stuff like that. But that actually might not be the correct um, logical way of looking at it. It might be more of, quite honestly, a democratic, a socialist way of looking at it. And I never really thought about that before. I mean, the more I think about this, the more I realize that I was kind of fundamentally incorrect. I mean, if you think about, and that actually changes things up quite a bit. Like for example, I don't know if you're watching this, but my sister, for example, now this place is very cheap. I'm almost gonna pay it off very soon. I mean, I'll have 90% of equity by the end of the year. And so my sister, for example, see, I make nearly 100K with the job, the active income that I have right now. But that was based off of 10 years of education and getting a PE license, right? She doesn't have any of that, and she also doesn't have the education, and she's not pursuing education. And it's also possible that she doesn't have the opportunity that I did in the past to get that education. So when you look at the disparity between my income and what she can make, and all the hard work that she's putting into, um, what I'm saying is that it kind of makes sense that if I have a certain level of capital, that it wouldn't really, that it would pretty much be in my best interest and the best interest of other people for me to sort of give, you know, not necessarily give her free housing, but if, let's say, if I have a free room, to say, hey, do you want to stay here for a few months, and or do you want to, and make it complementary to whatever, whatever you're trying to do with your education, or making it complementary to something else that you're trying to do. You don't have to pay me very much. It could be a lot less than what the average market value is, or maybe, so it's not that I'm trying to be like, what do they call that, um, a nonprofit for people, but it's more about the fact that I had certain opportunities, and the fact that I'm basically trying to employ capital in a way that is geared for labor. So, for example, by doing that, I'm complementary. It's making it complementary to that, because then she might actually want to work more towards those things, and then it'll build her way up. And in the same way that maybe I shouldn't have the same, like, maybe some of the capital I have right now, it was not earned in that sense, in this meaning that it created a hole for somebody else's suffering. You see what I'm saying? Coming from this point of view. So what I'm saying is that, like, for example, in many ways I did get lucky. I feel that I did get lucky, even though I didn't work hard as well. But in many ways I am lucky, because a lot of the things that it took to get here was just pretty much just like timing. I didn't have to do I didn't have to be extremely smart, I didn't have to be like prove to anybody anything ridiculous about me as a person, or anything special. It's seriously like, it was just timing and luck. So the fact that that happened means that if you look at everything as a whole, I probably created a hole in someone else's suffering, in a sense, coming from the whole capital as a whole. So, and I'm not saying I deserve less, but what I'm saying is that, um, in that sense, whatever capital I get should be geared towards pretty much the the labor of someone else. Um, and I know it sounds like I'm trying to just support what I'm reading and just bias towards that, but I'm looking at this from a different angle. I never saw it like that before, because before I just looked at it as, oh, well, collect as much as possible. That the game is all about getting as much net worth as possible, net worth this, net worth that, because that's all you hear on YouTube from these gurus and stuff like that, these investing people. is get your net worth up, get your net worth up. But honestly, net worth and capital go together, but net worth is just a uh, like a reflection that you have, basically that you have power. You have the power to employ, um, to create labor because you have so much capital, and it's possible that you're basically kind of circulating it. Like you have to look at you have to look at it as your net worth is kind of like a circulating figure if you're not greedy, meaning that if you're using it, you're also getting money as well. So you might be you might be spending, let's say, $1 million a year, right? Let's say if your net worth was $3 million a year, or sorry, I'm sorry, not that doesn't make sense. I meant, let's say if your net worth at this present time is $3 million, but then you're spending $1 million, let's say, yeah, $1 million a year, but then you're also getting $1 million a year as well. Then that means that that net worth is going to stay the same. So that is not necessarily a reflection of you being greedy. You see, it's like another way of looking at it. So that's I would say that net worth it made me question net worth a lot more because I never thought of it that way. In that perhaps it even though on one hand a lot of the liberals and stuff like that will probably look at it and think that if you have a high net worth you must be greedy. From another angle, from that flow angle, you could also look at it as it's actually it would not be greedy if it's a reflection of somebody who's employing or who's causing labor to occur and employing people and employing the world basically, or whatever their surrounding is. So I just thought that was interesting. So circling back to my example, so that's the whole thing, right? So for example, like if somebody purchases a home, it's part of their it's part of their net worth, but um, and so that may be a certain value. And so if that home is a certain value, it doesn't necessarily, they're not going to be using that value, part of that value, to employ anybody. But but what it could do is it could be used for the future of that. So maybe somebody might sell it, and then you go ahead and if you sell it, um, at some point in the future, maybe this entire time when you have that home or that piece of property, and let's say it gets up to $1 million. Maybe you bought it at $500,000 and it's $1 million. Well, that whole time you're doing things that are adding, perhaps adding value to it, making sure that it's and stuff like that. And so in that sense, you're not being greedy because you're planning on doing something with it that will cause basically labor to occur. Meaning that whether you get capital or you use it to rent out, and stuff like that, those are all forms of, and and the tax code also recognizes that as like kind of a way to stimulate the economy and stimulate labor. Um, and I'm not quite sure 100% how that works in terms of renting out, but because that's not necessarily my what I'm trying to say here, but it's more about like the whole act of getting your net worth up, based off of the appreciation and possibly selling it. And then like, okay, so then what do you do with that, right? With that capital? Well, you might go ahead and buy another house. So it's like this whole thing. And so that's kind of that's a hard decision in terms of finding somebody, determining whether somebody's greedy actually, whether they're constantly using their money, selling it and then buying a better property. That there's kind of like a gray area with that, because when you constantly do that, you're kind of like promising to the world that you're going to employ people, or you're going to employ, um, and apart from renting out, of course. But the whole thing about buying something, you know, new and stuff like that, and like something better. Because let's say at the end of the day, let's say there comes a point where you sell it, and you decide to keep that all that capital, right? Well, if you keep all that capital to yourself, again, just like what Smith said, at some point it has to go towards labor. It has to go towards labor in some way. So maybe maybe you'll maybe you'll use that money to build a bigger home from scratch, and half of it will be towards that, and then the other half, and then uh, and so in that way it's directly building wealth in the land. It's kind of interesting how that works if you think about it, because the whole idea is the wealth of nations, right? But and so it's like in a sense it's like doing that is a directly doing what would be the opposite of greed. And so um, it's kind of interesting how that works, because I guess Smith was even trying to go as far as, well, how did whatever you're purchasing, how did it get there, right? So maybe what he's saying is like that can also be related too. Like, so for example, what if that land was there, and let's say if in theory the people that were going to build off that land were the builders. Let's say if they said, well, we'll promise you uh, that you're going to get money, um, but it's not going to come until a future owner pays for this. So what if you come in from trying to sell that old property, and then that's what happens? So then, in that sense, you're paying for labor, and in that sense, it's a non-greedy way. So, in a theoretical way, and the tax code recognizes it too. When you buy up, it's almost like you're just employing people, in a theoretical way. But I just thought it was interesting because you can really kind of think about it now once you understand the Smith arguments of whether it's true greed, things that are happening are true greed or not. And you'll probably find that people are making decisions in a much more of a logical way than what meets the eye. And if 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 I'm looking at myself, I would say that I was being a little bit like, I might even be greedy right now and I'm not aware of it, but because for me it's like I'm sort of clinging on to this capital that I have because I don't really know what else I can, I kind of have uncertainty. So in a way that's kind of like greed, because you're just holding on to it for no really logical reason. And but for me, I just think that I'm doing what makes sense in the moment, because rather than just taking a big giant step, I'm just trying to do what makes sense at a minuscule level, because it just would be ridiculous to see such a large loss. You know, I wouldn't want that to happen. Uh, so I'm just trying to take baby steps, and I think it's logical. I mean, I'm basically doing a Dave Ramsey thing, and so I'm getting capital, right? So there's no, it's kind of a gray area. There's no telling in my case whether it's going to be great or not. I mean, really, it's like when the time comes, then we'll figure that out. It's kind of like you're living for God, or you're living a life of Christ, and you have yet to figure out whether it's like Judgment Day has yet to come. And in the same way, Judgment Day hasn't came yet. And it's just it's a very weird setup. I think I think the reason why that is because I was, as a millennial, I was kind of, and being in California, I was sort of forced in this position, um, and I'm just in a really weird position. I mean, I I'm very lucky I'm here, and I'm happy that my employers can understand where I'm at, even though I can't fully describe to them really what's happening. I mean, because some people might just say that what I'm doing is completely ridiculous, and that I just got to restart, redo everything, and the condo is totally inconvenient. But at the same time, there's other people that will say, well, this is perfectly a perfect investment. You're just in a, you're just kind of in this weird gray area because people aren't really, because you're not getting much help in the other scenario. Like if I were to actually rent it out, you know, fully. Um, I mean, it's going to be rented out by the end of the, well, by like next year, maybe around March or April, so in about a year. But but the idea is that like once it's rented out, um, I'm still going to be like employing people whenever there's a problem. So and from that point of view, it's like not really being greedy. But from another point of view, um, we have yet to figure out whether I'm going to be greedy because, for example, if I wanted to sell the place, well, what am I going to do with that money, right? So we'll see how morally grounded I am at that point. But I think I'm going to make the right decision. And right now, there's just you can't really say it's a gray area. You can't really say whether it's greedy or not or what I should be doing or anything because I haven't actually rented this out yet, and I haven't been able to make the decisions that would be required as a homeowner because I'm just not there with the capital. I just keep collecting the capital. So anyway, I'm going to get rid of this out of my purview. So yeah, that's what I was drinking, and what else would I want to say? Oh yeah, I wanted to go back to the types of income, and I'm gonna look it up just so I can try to educate people that are interested. So the types of income, or the ways that you can make income, um, or I should say, like having an edge. It was one way, like where it was like a certain type of knowledge, I guess. Shoot, what was it? Or I guess somebody who doesn't know. Um, Let me see here. I just let's see. Who doesn't? Jeez, I don't remember. It's on the top of my head. Shoot. Obviously, it's the type of work that you do would matter, and what he means by that is like sometimes you might be doing, and also like the wealth of that current region would also matter with respect to the kind of work it is. So somebody who's um, doing work towards a specific trade, like trying to think about this, something very specific for specific, like knitting like balls or something. I don't know, a specific ball as a specific toy that would pay perhaps handsomely if it was in high demand, or if it was in a certain area, or maybe that was his point. So, but at the same time, somebody who's a farmer who does like things that are more like somebody who like grazes cows or something um, is going to be a lot different. They're possibly going to get paid, you know, a lot differently. So maybe the opposite. They may get paid a lot more, where the other specialized might get paid a lot less. Um, Apologize. I'm just trying to look to see what that was exactly. Um, I'll find it soon. I just trying to look here. Uh, that's right. So he basically says if you're in a trade which relies on your disagreeableness, the more disagreeableness that is required, the more you're gonna get paid, or the more you're gonna get paid. So, like, it doesn't mean that you should be intentionally disagreeable, but it just means that the whole if it involves an aspect of disagreeableness, it's more likely to be paid more because it's I don't know. I guess it causes a lot more questioning things and consultations and stuff like that because people are going to want to understand why there's a disagreement, you know, and that if the nature itself is disagreeable, then that means that that people need consultation essentially. That's my understanding. So yeah, that would be essentially it. Now, I don't know how else to summarize that, but I'll probably talk about it more over time. But just thought that was interesting. I'll even read what it says here. It says, first, the agreeableness or disagreeableness of the employments themselves. So he's talking about. Hold on a second. First, the wages of labor vary with the ease or hardship, the cleanliness or dirtiness, and the honorableness or dishonorableness of the employment. And then, secondly, the wages of labor vary with the easiness and cheapness, or the difficulty and experience or expense of learning the business. Kind of like with me, like it took me 10 years to learn structural engineering. So, um, let's see, what else is there? Um, Thirdly, the wages of labor in different occupations vary with the constancy or inconstancy of employment. Employment is much more constant in some trades than in others. In the greater part of manufacturers, a journeyman may be pretty sure of employment almost every day in the year that he is able to work. So that was kind of what I was trying to say, but it came out differently about the whole situation with the ball, you know, or whatever. You're just kind of like you just get the work because it's available, you know. But well, I mean, I wasn't saying that exactly, but I was trying to make a corollary to that, and I guess it didn't come out right. Um, Here we go. Here's what I was trying to get. I was trying to get out of my mind. Here's essentially what I was trying to say. It says when the inconstancy of employment is combined with the hardship, disagreeableness, and dirtiness of the work, it sometimes raises the wages of the most common labor above those of the most skillful artificers. So that sounds pretty interesting. I'm trying to see where he discusses like in particular about the disagreeableness. I think he's just trying to go over a combination of all the fundamentals that he's trying to outline. Like, but I wanted to see if he says something about disagreeableness a little bit more. Here's another part that discusses disagreeableness. Those professions keep their level. However, with other occupations and notwithstanding these discouragements, all the most generous and liberal spirits are eager to crowd into them. Oh wait, no, that's not. That's something different. I don't know if he has anything in particular about that. Um, but anyway, I just wanted to have this. I'm on page 500 of this book out of 1,200 pages, so it's been on my mind, and I'm trying to discuss how it's changing me in many ways, how it's shaped my thoughts, and I feel like I'm more worldly in my perception of things now. Um, I'm not as stuck on understanding how people, like even my employers are acting towards me, like, oh, why is he doing that? No, I am starting to understand things a little bit better when it comes to that. Um, let's see. I'm sure there's more in here. I can probably discuss it in another video. But anyway, yeah. If anyone has any other comments to say, go ahead and say it. Um, Now, it's funny. Easter was yesterday, and um, it, even with this new perception of what I'm going through, I actually went to church for the first time in 16 years, and I went with my mother, and that was quite interesting. I didn't know how much it changed. It used to be a lot more personable. It used to be like make you feel bad for certain things. Like they would call people out. I remember when I went to church, I was about 16, 17 years old, and even more so, I was probably 8 or 10, and I don't know. They tried giving me a Bible, and I just I mean not back then. Oh, back then too, but on yesterday they gave me a Bible, and I'm just like, okay, well, thank you, and then I just gave it to my mom and said I don't really want this because unless it's studying the history of Jesus Christ or whatever, not not too interested. I mean, well, actually, I'll take that back. It's interesting stuff because now I can see it from a different point of view. But like, you gotta focus on what matters. So, right now, wealth of nations matters way more than that, um, and even some structural books I would probably say no to. But even though that's always relevant, I hate to say it, but like structural, like I probably should be studying for the SE, but I'm not. I'm not doing any of that. It's still very relevant to everything I'm doing because I do it every day for my job, but I still have to be somewhat global because I can't get stuck in one little thing, like one thing. I understand that like if you actually do your own structural engineering, it feels more global because you have to get involved in every aspect of it. But in my particular case, especially under this situation I have with my boss and his boss, I mean, there's really no reason for me to constantly think about engineering 24/7. I'm able to actually
get away from it after work, actually. So that's why I'm diverting my attention to try to do other things that are potentially more, potentially important, that are actually ironically getting to an intersection where I'd be able to do more structural engineering, doing it like myself, maybe even, or getting involved in other aspects of the field because it'd be the nature of it. Like if I started my own firm or something like that. All right. Well, thanks for watching. Hopefully you get some value out of this. I know it's a long video. I would hope to edit it at some time in the future if it was that valuable, but I don't think it will be. So I'm just gonna take it as it is. It's 45 minutes. Thanks for watching.